What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafted Workshop video. And today's video is kind of a combination of a project video and a techniques video. So I built this quick little sharpening station actually from an IKEA bamboo cutting board, but I want to show you how I built that, but then also how I sharpen my tools, my hand tools specifically, like my chisels, my hand plane irons, that kind of thing, because it's a process that I think can seem kind of mysterious a lot of times, but I have a pretty simple system. I'm definitely not a sharpening expert, but it works well for me. You can see I'm missing a lot of arm hair here. I've definitely been testing it out, and these tools are super sharp, so hopefully you can learn something there. But first, let's go ahead and start by showing you how I built this quick little sharpening station. I've had this IKEA bamboo cutting board hanging around my shop forever, just waiting for a purpose, and as it turns out, this was the perfect size for the sharpening station I had in mind. So I modeled up a quick sharpening station design in easel, and this whole system is based on my buddy James Wright's sharpening station, which I think is based on Paul Seller's sharpening station. The system is built around 3 DMT diamond plates, which are in varying grits from coarse to extra fine. And then the last sharpening surface is a leather strop, which is used as the final honing surface and can be used in between sharpening sessions for quick touch-ups. I got the cutting board clamped to the X-Carve spoil board and then started the first milling operation, which was a simple process of cutting the 4 pockets for the diamond plates and strop. The first 3 pockets for the diamond plates were slightly deeper than the strop area, since the leather isn't quite as thick as the diamond plates. And after the pockets were cut, I swapped over to a 60-degree V-bit so I could make this sharpening station a little extra fancy by milling in some labels for the different diamond plates. And this was my first time trying V-carving using easel, and it went really smoothly. The letters turned out super crisp, and both of these operations combined only took about 30 minutes. I must have shifted the labels in easel somehow between these two operations, as they were a little bit off-center in the end, but that was no biggie. After the X-Carve was finished up, I removed the cutting board, which I guess now is a sharpening station, sanded away any fuzzy bits off camera, and then test fit the diamond plates and strop. And the diamond plates were a perfect fit with just a little bit of wiggle room, which I added in during the design process just for ease of removal. But I needed to cut the piece of leather to size, and I figured the easiest way to do this would be to use one of the diamond plates as a template. So I pulled out my self-healing mat and cut the leather to size using a rotary cutter, and I love these rotary cutters. They leave a super clean edge and are just perfect for this kind of work. Once the leather was cut to size, I pre-drilled a few holes through the leather into the bamboo and then drove in a few decorative screws to hold the leather in place. And the screw heads are slightly below the surface of the leather, but nothing I sharpen will ever get into those areas anyway, so there's nothing really to worry about there. I added a few rubber feet to the bottom of the board, which actually came with the diamond plates, and then considered filling in the letters with Sharpie, but figured I didn't want to push my luck there. I applied a couple coats of wipe-on poly just to help seal and protect the bamboo over time, since it will be getting covered in glass cleaner and metal dust on a regular basis, and then I could finally get to doing some sharpening. And my previous sharpening system was the Work Sharp, which worked pretty well, but I was never able to get things super sharp with it, and you can see the old micro bevel from the Work Sharp system, something I've actually since ditched in my sharpening routine. And now I use this Veritas honing guide. I think this is the deluxe model, which has worked really well for me. You set the projection of the blade with this little guide, lock it into place, and then get to sharpening. It's super quick, you don't need to plug it in, and it's really easy to make adjustments to different bevel angles with this system, which is nice considering I have a variety of bevel angles between my chisels and plane irons. For the lubricant on the diamond plate, I just use basic glass cleaner. A few spritzes is plenty, and then I just rest the blade against the plate, applying even pressure with my fingers, and then run the blade back and forth across the surface. And as you can see here, I must have sharpened this to a slightly different bevel angle previously, so I had a decent amount of material to remove here, and ideally I'd probably use a bench grinder for this kind of thing, but I don't have one, and the coarse stone works. It really only takes a couple extra minutes, and I don't have to dedicate shop space to a bench grinder that I wouldn't use that much. I just kept running the blade across the coarse diamond plate, which is the equivalent of about 325 grit, until I had even scratch patterns across the entire face of the bevel. And once I was done with the first plate, I could move on to my next diamond plate, which is the fine grit, which I think is roughly 600 grit. And these last 2 plates go a lot faster than the first, since the bevel is already established and I'm really just refining the surface here. And one other thing to mention, one of my favorite things about diamond plates is that they stay flat and don't wear unevenly, even if you sharpen them in the same spot over and over. And this makes sharpening super quick. You never have to flatten your diamond plates like you would with water stones or oil stones. After the fine plate, I moved on to the extra fine plate, which is roughly 1200 grit, and this really refines the surface and gets the edge extremely sharp. Once again, this doesn't require as many strokes, and I'm really just removing the scratch pattern from the previous plate here. And I should also mention here, when I'm sharpening in the future, unless I really damage the edge by dropping the chisel or something, I don't even need to start with that first plate unless I let things just go for way too long and the edge gets super dull. I can just skip right to the fine or even the extra fine plate, depending on the condition of the edge. The last step in the sharpening process is the strop, and I think this is really the step I was missing out on with my previous sharpening system. My strop is just a scrap piece of 9-ounce vegetable tan leather, which is plenty beefy for this application. I applied some more buffing compound to the rough side of the leather and then pulled the bevel of the chisel across the strop 30 to 40 times until it starts to get a mirror polish near the edge. You should also see that buffing compound get a little darker as you run the bevel across the strop. I also worked on the back of the chisel a few times just to make sure and remove any burr that's formed during the sharpening process, and also to polish that face a little bit. After the stropping, the blade is super sharp, and the real test for sharpness in my mind is the shaving test, and as you can see, it passed with flying colors, taking all the hair it came into contact with on the first pass. I could also, of course, test the edge on wood on this scrap piece of walnut I had, and as you can see, it sliced through this end grain super cleanly, leaving a nice smooth surface, and it also made quick work of this edge grain and left a shiny, almost glass-like surface finish, and I'd call that a sharp chisel. Now, all of these steps were done assuming the back of the chisel was flat, but what if it wasn't? I had already flattened the backs of my main Narex chisels with the Work Sharp, but I had some cheaper Harbor Freight chisels hanging around that I hadn't actually sharpened yet. And as you can see here, the scratch pattern from the factory is still there on the back of the chisel, so the first step is to remove those scratches and replace them with some finer scratches from the diamond plate. And when flattening the backs of chisels, you really only need to focus on the inch or so nearest the cutting edge. There's really no point in flattening the entire back of the chisel. It's just kind of wasted effort. And after getting a consistent scratch pattern from the coarse plate, I moved up through to the fine plate, working perpendicular to the direction from the coarse plate so that it was a little easier to see when the scratches were gone. And then I repeated the same process on the extra fine plate and then finished it off with a little stropping. With the back nice and flat, I went through the whole sharpening process on the bevel and then could again test the chisel's sharpness, which it passed with flying colors. So that's pretty much how I sharpen my chisels, but what about plane irons? Well, this sharpening jig has another attachment for wider plane irons, but the whole sharpening system is essentially the same. I used the same projection guide to set the bevel angle, 30 degrees in this case, and then I clamped down the plane iron, making sure it was parallel to the projection guide so it sharpened square to the bevel edge. After that, it's just more of the same process as before, moving up through the grits and then finishing with the strop. And you can see here that this iron is actually hollow ground from the manufacturer, so sharpening really only hits the very front and back edge of the bevel, and this makes sharpening a whole lot faster since you don't have to remove as much material. And finally, I could test it out, first with the shaving test, which of course was no problem, and then I reinstalled the iron in the plane, got it set up and all centered, and then could make some shavings. And this plane is now cutting beautifully, producing these awesome paper-thin shavings, and I could actually see through the shavings when I held it up to the light. Pretty awesome. And with that, I think that's basically it when it comes to how I sharpen my tools. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I'm really happy with the way this came together. It's nice to have a simple system that I can just kind of pull out of a drawer from below my workbench here, sharpen really quickly, and then just get right back to work. Because I think that was my big barrier to sharpening before, is it was something that plugged in and I had to do all these changing of plates and that kind of thing, and it just took longer than I needed it to. So this is a really effective system. It's simple. It is a bit of initial investment, but I think it's something that will last you for many, many, many years to come. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I also want to give a quick shout out to IsoTunes, who are the exclusive hearing protection provider in my shop. They actually have these new models, the IsoTunes Extra, which I'm loving. I got better battery life, they sound better, I'm loving them. So if you want to learn more about them, check out the link in the video description below. I'll also have links to all of the tools and materials I used in this video, including the honing guide and all these diamond plates and that kind of stuff, so definitely go check those out. Also, if you're new here, go ahead and get subscribed. I put out new project videos like this pretty much every week. Also ring that little notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos, and I'm also doing some more live streams here lately, so you won't miss those. And last, I have added this YouTube sponsor, I guess they're calling it membership functionality, to the channel. You can check it out. There's a button on the screen and also below the video, but basically you get access to all kinds of exclusive content. You support me monthly, and it's just a really nice thing. Nice to be able to connect with kind of my super fans there. So hopefully you guys will check that out and enjoy. But I guess until next time, thank you guys all for watching, and until next time, happy building.